So I figured I've been thinking a while about making a video or just kind of a couple of videos on the things that have to do with the major hang-ups that we go through and the pains that everybody feels on a regular basis. We didn't get any training in any of those fields. We didn't have any guidance. And so there's certain things like insecurity that are kind of plaguing humanity in a way. And so I thought I'd just touch on that in my own journey with insecurity, which has been pretty vivid and long. And so if I take it back a little in my own life, I had a lot of insecurity socially and mentally and emotionally. And let me just say that, like, the stuff I'm going to say in this video, it doesn't mean that insecurity is gone. It just takes it from being something that's crippling and leads to a lot of loneliness and judgment on yourself and depression. And it just makes it into something you can work with. And I think that's something that everybody needs because, like I said, there's no direction. So if you were to take insecurity and you were to just break it down, a lot of what's happening is we're experiencing the past play itself out over in our head again. And not the real past. There's no way to even really say that something happened in a real way. It's all really subjective. And so a lot of it can be built up over years of thinking about stuff and focusing on your projections of what you think happened in certain situations. And so, like, let's say, for example, you're going out and you want to share yourself and you want that to be received, but you don't really know how to do it. And when the opportunity comes up, there's a lot of inner dialogue that talks to you about you in a pretty negative way. So it'll tell you either you're not enough, or something from the past that's happened is going to happen again. And that's just not true. And regardless of how true or not it is, the emotions inside of the body can really cripple you in a lot of ways. And so what do? Well, in my own life, I faced insecurity to the point where I had to be like a good 8-9 years just trying to avoid situations with people, fearing that they would misunderstand me. And I think that's a big part of insecurity, is being misunderstood. So if we're to take it and break it down, how do we get past something like the idea of being misunderstood? Well, like with anything you've ever heard me talk about, it always has to do with where did it come from? And almost all of it comes from our childhood. And most of that comes from before we can even remember. Say we're like 3, 4, 5 years old. So you want to take the insecurity that you experienced then, and you want to be able to look at it differently. Again, in every situation, there's other players. It's pretty rare, I would say a lot less common, for situations happening when we're by ourselves, where no one sees or no one interacts with us or knows or judges us, to cripple us with insecurity. And a lot of the reasons that it stays crippling is because we cement the other person's perspective on us happening. And that's just kind of an ignorant way to view it, because there's no way that we were experiencing what the other person was thinking and feeling accurately. So if we're being judged, we think, well, we'll create a whole backstory around a person and they must think this and they don't like us and that might happen again. It might feel bad. Well, the insecurity is playing itself out over and over and over. It's looping like all our emotions do. And so there's really no point in keeping the fear bottled up, repeating itself while trying to avoid it externally. Because a lot of times, if you're faced with insecurity, you're going to be projecting it onto a new situation so you can validate that it was true in the beginning, it's true now, and your emotional loop essentially just remain the same. But when we talk about what other people are feeling, a lot of times it doesn't include compassion, which is just a general understanding that people are in pain. And if someone's judging you or projecting onto you, there's a couple ways you can view it that are kind of super perspectives, right? Which is you're projecting onto them what they're projecting. If it's a quantum reality, which there's a lot of stuff that says that it is, and a good way to think about it is what you think is going to happen happens. Things that you would consider surprises are really just subconscious things building up over time to the point where they can manifest physically. And so if you go all the way back to before you even had any ideas, everything is essentially neutral. It doesn't mean anything, because even the context for meaning something is based off of programming. The idea that the world means something, the idea I'm speaking to you in English, the idea that the way my hair looks and my clothes and my facial expressions and the tone of my voice, the idea that these things mean something is all just programming on a really deep level. A lot of times it's developed when we're still really young. And so it's really hard to deal with the core problems if you're always working on the symptoms. And most of the time we are working on the symptoms. We don't want to feel bad. We don't want to feel judged, right? But people can't really judge you for something you're not judging yourself for already. And if they do, it doesn't register as offensive unless it's the first time you've ever faced that judgment. So if you've always been completely clear of judgment and you come across someone and they just judge the hell out of you, it might break apart your worldview in a way that will form insecurity then and later if it's allowed to grow. And so if you take an insecure situation, let's say you're hitting on someone of the opposite sex and you trip and fall down. It's not a good example, but it would bring about the same sort of emotions, which are rejection, insecurity. Sorry about this camera. But these things are symptoms. And even if you see them in someone else, you can unlock really awesome forms of compassion. Because if someone's judging you for something, let's say you slip and fall down and everyone goes, "You're an idiot," and laughs. It's not personal. That can be dissected into the ideas behind it, which are other people are feeling insecure. When there's a chance to release that into the external world in order to create more of an internal security, people will tend to do that. They don't really know any better. And so it creates a lot of fear. We're all afraid that everyone's projecting onto us or going to. Especially in a society like ours, where we're projecting the nicest aspects of ourselves all the time. So everyone's basically lying to themselves and to each other to maintain some sort of social standard that internally it's not really how we feel, at least on a level that is resonating with our emotional body. And so you're always going to have situations come up that are going to be giving you signs. The universe externally is always giving you signs. And another one of these power perspectives is to just allow the external situations to tell you what's going on internally, right? So you're driving down the road, there's somebody slow in front of you, you get frustrated, you want to go somewhere. You start to get angry at the person, honk your horn, you might start yelling, and you can dissect that into, well, first off, there's desire to be somewhere. There's anxiety about being there at a certain time. There's fear of failure, of not showing up at that time. There's projecting a standard onto another person that they don't know anything about. Someone might just be casually driving, and you're racing to go from point A to point B. All these things are permission slips socially, subconsciously, for us to throw our internal emotional struggle at the external. So if you can comprehend how that functions, then it is, I mean, it's a lot of work, but you can start to take every situation that you go through with other human beings, and you can really develop compassion, which is understanding. It's not just like helping people who are in need, who are essentially neutral to you. Someone on the side of the road, you give them money. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but at the end of the day, the way that we kind of you can transmute the internal by using the external is by, when you have a permission slip to react back, you actually apply compassion in the hard times. And so it's a really hard thing to do. It's not something you can kind of pull off right away, but even the thinking about it or the desire to do it starts to kind of form a platform to stand on. And so a lot of the stuff that you can do is decharge emotions. If you're able to take a situation and break it down into what are you feeling, well, then you're able to go in and you're able to think, well, I'm feeling impatience, I'm feeling anxiety, I have a standard I'm holding myself to that's kind of creating a fear of failure, which can all be tied back to rejection, which again, it all goes back to really, really old stuff, like when you're a baby. And so if you're able to take these things and you're able to decharge them, it starts a process of freeing yourself from the loop of your projections. And so let's say someone slams on the brakes in front of you. You almost get in a car accident. You're upset. Okay. Well, at the time, you might not be able to control your reaction. Again, reactions happen before you're able to really understand what's happening. But it doesn't mean that you have to log a bunch of time in those frequencies. Now, if you have a ton of stuck frequencies, again, just anxiety, fear, all these things, you have to be able to do something with them. And we're not really taught anything about doing stuff. And so one of the things that you can do is you can take all these feelings and you can just feel them, amplify them. If you're frustrated, don't make it about being frustrated as a person. Just make it as, okay, the amount of frustrated that I am is the capacity I have for frustration. It's not invalid, but at the same time, it's a good marker into how much frustration is already going on inside of you, what your high score is for your frustration. And so, if you feel these situations and you allow the frustration to get bigger and bigger inside of yourself, you're able to actually start to move it, because the energy is like a clenched fist from an experience you had in the past that's extremely painful, at least defined that way. So you're able to figure out what your definitions are. But let's say you don't project it externally and you take that pain and it goes from being clenched and you run it and you feel it as much as you can and you just kind of give it space, enough space, don't throw it at the external world. It kind of breathes and it goes from being this really solid brick, and the more you work on it, it kind of turns into more particles with space of them. And these particles can be disassembled into memories, and those memories can actually be healed, because there's not anything inherently incorrect or wrong that you or anyone else has ever done. Everyone, by default, is doing the best that they can with the information that they have at the time. Even if they're trying to do terrible things, it's still a defense mechanism. And so, if you're driving down the road and you start to feel these things, you can simply just allow them to run through your body and visualize putting those electrical charges, because that's really what it is we're defining frequencies running through the body as good or bad based off what our range is. And so people talk about wanting to be happy or at peace or all these different things. Those are just stages. The desire to be happy or peaceful permanently is only sort of poor thinking emotionally. It comes from a place of not being happy. Now, let's say you were happy all the time. You're not thinking about being happy. So there's stages beyond this, right? This idea of being happy is a charge, like an orgasm. It feels good in a way that you can handle. But even something that feels really, really good and it keeps getting bigger and bigger will start to feel like pain. And you can keep working the energy to allow your harmonic range to grow. There's no frequencies that are inherently bad. There's just certain limits to the amount of electricity that can run through a person's body, especially if the body is lined up in a way emotionally like my own was, where your nervous system would be affected by your emotions and you wouldn't be able to express them. This is true for a lot of guys. We don't have a good framework to share our emotions, and when we try to share our emotions, it's like a dam collapsing. You might not be able to just share 5% of it, so it might come across as rage, might come across as violence, it might come across as just massive amounts of fear and insecurity. And so being able to take and isolate these things and figure out what to do with them is just unbelievably helpful. So let's take another example and we'll break it down. Okay? So you want to go out. Someone invites you to a party. Okay? Hey, John, do you want to go to a party? Oh, yeah, that sounds great. Well, the party comes up, you're getting ready for the party, and then you just have crippling fear. It might be disguised as not wanting to go. It might be disguised as judgment onto the people involved or a sense of apathy. But at the end of the day, it's an energy inside of you that causes you to turn around. And when you turn around from it, it basically chases you. And then your mind will start to build it into this bigger and bigger monster. And there's absolutely nothing there other than what was already there the whole time, which is the way that you're inherently feeling inside. And we're able to kind of keep these feelings at bay, especially in this modern world with all sorts of distractions. Social media, buying things on Amazon, exchanging emotions with other people. These things kind of create an ebb and flow of highs and lows in our emotional body that doesn't allow us to feel what we're generating, what we're giving off. And so in order for us to do this, let's go back to this party situation. Well, let's say this comes from a time when you were younger and you weren't picked at recess to be on a team or something like that, right? Now in your mind, you're projecting that everybody is having similar judgments on you. And whether that's true or not is kind of irrelevant because, again, their judgments are based off their own realities. And so you're afraid of it happening again. Well, what can really happen again? The thing that happened in the first place, you're just mulling over in your head over and over. That's the worst part of it. Over and over and over, you feel the pain as it gets worse and worse as you project that it's something bigger than it was. And so the external doesn't need to be scary at all, even though it appears like the only scary thing. It really isn't, because it doesn't inherently mean anything. And so the joy of this path is once you kind of get yourself to a point where you can create frameworks for reality and how it works and what it is and what it means to you, and your emotional body can get on board for that. it's the blank canvas that you're going to ultimately create what you're here to create. And I don't know what that is for you. For myself, again, it's momentary stages of allowance and acceptance, right? So as I'm filming this video, like you looking at yourself in a video camera, which is awkward. I don't see myself that often in this way. And so you have flare-ups of emotions that might be really small. And again, the less stuff you have going on in your life, the more you're going to be able to feel these minute micro emotions. And so being able to handle them in a way that allows them to pass will allow you to get back to that sort of quantum neutrality, or the hub, as we call it. And the hub, it's kind of a hard thing to describe, but if you can allow your emotional body to get out of the repeating patterns of the past, the hub is essentially like an interdimensional spaceport where you can actually use frequency to shift through realities to actually impact the external by taking steps above it in the internal. And so if you understand that the external is happening after the internal, then the reactions to the external become a form of transmutation, right? So someone punched you in the face, you reacted, now someone punches you in the face again. Okay, now you might react the same way, you might scream, you might get angry, you might cry. Every second that you're able to actually take that energy and you're able to actually move it up a rung in terms of its frequency, actually transmutes it permanently. So if you think of every single emotion as a chord, for people out there who play music, there's really, really, really hard chords that nobody wants to play, and everybody in society generally agrees these are like really hard emotions. They're really bad chords. Well, it's one thing to be happy, right? Everyone wants to be happy, but the key to happiness isn't just being able to play the chord of happiness, it's being able to transition to happiness from all the chords. Anyone can get to happiness if they're at a chord where almost all your fingers are already playing the chord of happiness. But can you go from here down to here really fast and make it sound fluid, make it feel fluid? Well, it takes practice. But in order to practice, you have to get excited about the way that you feel that's crippling you. And this paradigm shifting viewpoint on fear becomes super addictive. And once it becomes super addictive, it's just only a matter of time before you can free yourself from the programming of the reality, free yourself from the emotional loops, free yourself from the personality. Because again, the personality is nothing more than the looping emotional traumas that we've had and their defense mechanisms being justified socially. So we go through the same stuff, we blame it on the same people, we find other people who blame it on the same people, we figure out how to manage that social scene, and then we become more solid in that. You're afraid of not having money, you become really good at making money. That doesn't take away your fear of not having money. If anything, it solidifies it more, which is why they say that people who have a lot of money, are further away from their divinity. It's not that, again, money's not inherently evil, but money is existing in the same way. It's just a framework within a reality that's, although the majority of people are programmed to believe it's the reality, it's not. It's just the reality for people who are lost emotionally, and they're just ping-ponging from emotional reaction to emotional reaction and naming it their name and calling it their life. There's plenty of realities out there that have nothing to do at all with politics, that don't have to do with America and Earth and English and anything. And they're extremely subtle. And so once you understand, you can deconstruct what we're using to create this reality, you don't have to take on what your programming is, which again is based off TV shows, things you heard when you were a toddler, just experiences you had that you didn't understand. Like school is one of the main ones, because we're indoctrinated through school to all of us have the same reality, right? You start out in kindergarten, you're not competing with all the other people around you to have the most money or be the most successful. Success is something different then, which might be toys, which again, it goes back to a programming even before school, which is made up. So they're all made up, and the emotional reactions to them are what keep you in the system and cripples you. And so to be able to take that crippling energy and turn it into something else is really what the whole work is. You have people talk about shadow work or the path of light or whatever. You can call it that if you want to, but again, those are just viewpoints that are based off of the original reality being solid. It's almost a poverty mentality on being able to work your energy. And so, because once you get free of that, the ideas and concepts of being a person and life and death and relationships and fears and money and all this stuff, they just simply fall apart. And once you start taking your old memories and your fears and you start being able to turn them into something different than what they were, if you can take a major trauma and you can see it from the opposite perspective, where you have compassion for the person who hurt you, now you have two perspectives. And so if you have two, it's not that hard after you get to two to get to three. And then 4, 5, 6, 7. It really doesn't matter from that point, because now you basically unlock the quantum viewpoint on a situation, which means you can think about it and you can access any emotion that you want. That's it. And so you might not want to access an emotion. Again, stages beyond emotion exist, but most people really aren't there. So touching on that stuff is kind of more fantasy based, at least right now. But people are getting there. And so just to be able to take these emotions like insecurity, it's just going to happen over and over and over and over again. And the time in between is going to be filled up with things that are going to make you not feel it. They're going to be anti-insecurities, or securities, I guess, things that make you feel secure. People try to find relationships that make them feel secure, jobs, friends, all sorts of things. Nobody can make you feel any more secure than anyone can make you feel insecure. I'm not sure if I said that right, but no one can make you feel secure or insecure. It's all just circumstantial reactions to emotional loops. And so, again, breathing, I notice that when I feel anxiety or when I feel insecurity, in my chest or down in my stomach, a lot of times like in my third chakra, like right at my solar plexus, or down further below my belly button, will become clenched. And if I'm feeling a lot of pain or insecurity, I actually feel like a throbbing like this, like boom, 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 like inside of my stomach that just keeps clenching more and more and more. And it's crippling. Like I said, I spent a lot of time there where I wouldn't even interact with anyone, didn't have any friends, didn't do anything, just because of self-judgment and what I projected onto people. Now when I moved the energy out, the people didn't, when I went back to interact with people, they weren't upholding my ideas about them. If I got back to a neutral state, essentially I could have a new raw experience with them, which would show me even more of my projections. Because ultimately, the form of sort of an objective observation is kind of like a state, I think, far above happiness, because it starts to head into peace and joy. And when you're able to feel those things and you're able to maintain them as the external world just kind of keeps looping and kind of keeps throwing new expansion packs at you, then you start to build a foundational emotional body there. And no one can ever take that away from you. So all the traumas you've gone through, all the depression, all the fears, all the pains, that's the syllabus, and that is going to ultimately end up being what you're the most thankful for, because we all came here to essentially figure out how to work the chords, from those chords into the chords that we want to play, and make them harmonize and make it sound beautiful. And it just takes a ton of practice. And the practice is nothing more than letting go. There's 1,000 different ways to let go. And I could tell you a bunch of my videos have different ideas about it. But again, most Eastern religions are just packed with ways to let go or detach. And if you can view it this way, then insecurity doesn't have to lead to self-judgment permanently, which doesn't have to lead to depression, which can help a lot of people avoid suicide. And I've had a lot of really good friends go down that road of suicide, and I myself have spent a lot of time inside of the energies that can culminate in killing yourself. And so the ability to take those and turn them into whatever you want is the reason why I'm trying to make these kind of videos, because I know a lot of people out there, if you're searching for videos on how to deal with insecurity, you're already feeling insecure. You don't want to feel insecure anymore. You already know how it feels. It sucks. And people might tell you to get over it. People might try to create circumstances for you where you don't feel it anymore, but they can't. It's just a looping, subjective viewpoint on a situation. And every moment can be the same. But if you've already tarnished your character that you think you are with self-judgment, you might just have to drop the character. A lot of people think they're going to be able to keep their characters. You can't keep your character on this path. You just can't. That's why you have so many, you hear about so many different people changing their names, or just simply creating symbols, or all sorts of things, because the character can't survive the transmutational process, because the character is based on the process remaining constant. There is a whole RPG element, a leveling up element to staying the same. Now, if you have no intention of moving your energy, if you have no intention of diving into your traumas, then life, the life that we know, we all see all around us, is basically about how much can you level up being in that much pain? How much can you avoid it? How much money can you get? How much pleasure can you get so you don't have to feel it? Which is a totally valid experience. It's not everyone's experience to tackle this and be like, all right, I'm going to transmute it, because, like I said, not a lot of people even have access to that sort of thinking, let alone being able to validate techniques and tools that can stand up against like lifetimes worth of inner judgment and pain. And so, not everyone's here to be free. It's not the theme they're studying. But if you are studying the theme of freedom, you can almost guarantee that you're going to go through experiences of crippling depression. You're going to go through massive amounts of pain. You're going to go through suicidal thoughts, insecurities, judgments, because these are the hard chords. And if you really want to be a good musician emotionally, then you're just going to have to fail over and over and over and love it. And that's the sooner that that's accepted, the sooner that the past can be accepted, because those are almost like classes, and then each given moment is like an assignment almost from those classes. And so you can still get an A in the class even though you've had a lot of really shitty assignments. And so hopefully that helps, again, with the feelings, just to give some really basic ways to move energy. The feelings can be breathed into. If you breathe through your nose or your mouth, each one is able to essentially move into different parts of your body. So just like yoga, a lot of people are going to watch this, are going to know about yoga, meditation now. It's still confusing, but more and more people are understanding it and trying to get a grasp on what it means. But to be able to breathe into an anxiety and to give it life, think of it as a really dehydrated, hungover part of yourself, and your breath is just like fresh water. You can just breathe in and smile at it, and then release it. It's not your job to carry it around. It doesn't do any good. It's not going to be resolved socially later if you're carrying it around. The situation might be completely resolved in a way that you would hope for, but if you aren't able to move the energy, you're still going to hold on to the same feelings. And if you're able to forgive the other person, you're probably just going to project it onto a new person in the same way. And so again, that's how the loop gets created. We just go through day after day after day, and we're like, I'm mad about this. And we're like, weren't you that same level of mad yesterday about this? Yeah. Well, maybe you're just mad. How are you going to stop being mad? And so again, the breath is the answer to all of it, because when you focus on the breath, you come into the present moment. And the present moment is literally the only thing that exists. And it's just so neutral, so undefined, that it gives you a moment of freedom from stories. And stories are the only thing that causes pain. They really are. And so if you're able to go into the breath and you're able to let go of the stories, you're able to actually look at things in an objective way. And you will go through stages where you change the stories. You might have to change the stories so they cause a positive emotional reaction when you think about them. Or maybe even just a less negative emotional reaction. That's a lot of what the shadow work of compassion does. It kind of changes your hatred and retaliation energy into something that isn't as justified. If you can see why the other person is acting the way they are and they're in pain, then you don't have to hurt them back. And if you understand that it's the same life force running through you, running through me, running through everybody, everything, every animal, every plant, it's the same animating force. The character is the only thing that gets in the way of that. And the characters, again, stories, 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 stories. And the more you're able to just focus on this sort of namaste idea that you're witnessing the other out there as yourself, then you're able to create that footing. And that footing will, if you have the intention and you're willing to go into the emotional energy, you will get past insecurity, and you will get past fear, and you will get past depression. And that's what's important to remember. It might take 10 years, like for myself, it's taken like a good 10, 15 years of, constantly focusing on breath work, perspectives, just meditation, just everything. But I can tell you that for like 10 of those years, I was just like, are you serious? Like, this just goes on forever? It all just goes on forever? And all this work I'm doing is for nothing? And that's not true. Like, once one starts permanently moving, others will start permanently moving. And if you can keep that hope alive, those seeds will be huge. The plants will be huge by the time those energies start moving. So just remember, faith is the gateway to peace. If you're able to have faith that everything is going the way it should go, that everything is the way it should be, the mind will figure out why and how it thinks that that's true. But you don't have to figure it out with the mind. If you're able to just trust, it allows the emotional body and the nervous system to relax. And then from there, if you can truly get into it, that is where the hub is. And that is where you're able to actually choose your next step dimensionally and start building from there. People who are in supreme pain, suicidal amounts of pain, are in massive amounts of resistance to the electrical currents that are causing them to be in pain. Later on down the path, those same places you thought are hell, you'll go back to, and you'll clean out, and you'll love being there, and you'll create happiness and joy there, and they will become beautiful and neutral, and you'll be able to reach out to other people who are stuck there, because you'll understand now you can run that much electricity through your body, and it doesn't have to be something based off of resistance because it doesn't have meaning. And so hopefully that helps. I know it's a lot of information, but I do know that insecurity is this really deep pit, and there's just not that much information on how to get past it in terms of tangible. But if you have any questions about it, again, I haven't mastered it. I should say that I can take the way that I'm feeling and I can get excited about it. But I haven't mastered any of it to the point where it just ceases to exist. I don't believe that that happens yet in terms of this path. I think ultimately once you can play all chords, you can switch from any emotion to any emotion, anything can mean anything, then I think, yeah, a lot of stuff dissolves from having meaning completely. But it's not the point I'm at permanently, and it's probably not the point you're at if you're watching this. And so again, all we can do is talk about it and hope to just support each other and help figure it out. And so if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and I'll try to touch on it. I've really been down there, and I spent a lot of time trying to help people out of there before I got out of there. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are doing that too. And a lot of times that can be a big distraction, thinking that you can save someone because you don't want them to experience what's caused you pain. But once you understand that it wasn't causing you pain, it was just part of your path, you start to become a little bit more okay if people are there. You understand it's part of the process, and you start to have sort of reverence or respect for those people who are willing to be born into tough circumstances or be able to go into intense pains. And it just kind of creates, again, another good framework for camaraderie out of insecurity, where you can start relating to people on pain and hope instead of relating to people on resistance to specific types of pain. So I hope that helps.